Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Eating Disorder Hope Google Hangouts. We're so excited that you can join us tonight. And we will be discussing an important topic that definitely deserves a lot of attention, and that is about diabetes and eating disorders, or what is often heard of as diabulimia. And to discuss this topic, we have the founder and CEO of the Diabulimia Helpline, Erin Akers. So thank you for joining us tonight, Erin. We're so glad that you could be here.
For having me.
Thank you. So just to get started, can you maybe just explain a little bit about what diabulimia is, or how are people who have diabetes more at risk for eating disorders?
Yeah, of course. Diabulimia is a subset eating disorder that typically falls under the bulimia category, although it does not include making yourself throw up. What it is for type 1 diabetics who have to take insulin every day in order to stay alive. They either take less than or omit completely um, their insulin. And so in doing so, their body is forced to feed upon itself, much like you would see in an anorexic's body, but it is also very, very, very fatal. Diabetics are also more prone to have other kinds of eating disorders such as anorexia, bulimia, or EDNOS. And this comes from a focus or concentration on food and numbers, which you
Mhm.
see in diabetes training. So after you've been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and that's type 1 diabetics are the only kind of diabetics that we work with as opposed to type 2. But after you've been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, doctors start to put the focus on your blood sugar numbers, which of course are very important, but it instills in diabetics this mindset of numbers being the most important thing. Also, with an increased chance of heart disease and strokes, weight control is also very big in diabetes training. So doctors also put a very heavy control, more so than I think is either necessary, but more so good or healthy on weight management in diabetics. In addition to that, a diabetic's life very much revolves around food. You know, they say that 80% of a type 1 diabetic's thoughts are about what they just ate or what they're going to eat, because
Mhm.
how rigidly controlled we need to be with our medicine and the part that food plays with it. And so with this, diabetics are at a threefold likeliness to develop an eating disorder. And in fact, 1 out of 4 type 1 diabetic women has, in a recent study from the Johnson Diabetes Center, has admitted to omitting their insulin in order to lose weight. And that eating disorder, diabulimia, has a higher mortality rate than anorexia or bulimia put together.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's really important that there is more attention being garnered about this, because we definitely hear a lot about anorexia and we hear a lot about bulimia, and thankfully we're starting to hear more about binge eating disorder, but I definitely don't think there's as much awareness about diabetes and eating disorders. So I appreciate you sharing that. Can you maybe share a little bit about your own personal journey with diabulimia and just how you came to recover? And if you could share a little bit about that with our viewers, that'd be great.
Yeah. um, let's see. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 9 years old. And by the time I was 14, I was sick of being diabetic, and I was also a very overweight child, and I was sick of being overweight, and I was sick of my doctors harassing me about diabetes and my weight. And so, one particular doctor appointment, because diabetics every 3 months, during one doctor appointment, my doctor told me basically, lose weight or you're going to die. And so
Mm,
I figured out, all right, you know what? If that's what you're telling me, then that's what I'm going to believe, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to lose weight. And over a period of about 3 months, I lost a very significant amount of weight. It was over a summer. And I didn't have to be healthy during that summer. I didn't have school. I didn't have anything to go to. And so I basically um, only took the bare amount of insulin in order to stay alive. I wasn't running. I wasn't jumping. I wasn't playing. I wasn't really living. I had no energy. My body had no insulin. It had no way to use anything that any of the caloric intake that I had. I was just half dead, basically, for 3 months. I ended up in the hospital 3 times in those 3 months, and that started my journey with diabulimia. Over the next 4 years, till I was 17, I would be in and out of the hospital over 24 times. I was in the hospital during my senior prom. I was in the hospital during a senior award ceremony. A lot of really big, important milestones in any teenager's life, and I was in the hospital for it. At 17, I was diagnosed with autonomic peripheral neuropathy, which is the deadening of the nerve cells in the feet. And up until that point, I was planning on being a musical theater major. I'd been accepted into a musical theater program. And because of my poor diabetes control and the fact that I hadn't really been taking insulin, I had developed this complication and was basically told I would never be a musical theater major. I was never going to dance professionally. And it kind of changed my life a little bit. And I still pretended I didn't have an eating disorder, but I tried to stop, knowing that I had done this damage to myself. Went off to college, and turns out I couldn't stop by myself. I was 18 and living away from home, and continued to stop taking my insulin. And when you do it, you make yourself very, very physically ill, very much like having flu-like symptoms. And I would be in my dorm room, too weak to get up to walk to the bathroom, and throwing up in a plastic garbage bag because I was so sick. It was probably the most miserable I've ever been, 3 months of my life. And I developed a staph infection in my spine and had to be flown home to Seattle, where I was seen at Seattle Children's Hospital. And after that, my parents told me they weren't going to pay to send me back to school to kill myself, basically. And I ended up in a 3-month eating disorder treatment program in Florida. And I'm very thankful for that. Is for diabetic eating disorders. We went to NEDA, and they said, well, this is a diabetes problem. And so we went to the American Diabetes Association, and then they said, this is an eating disorder problem. But all I knew was that it was a problem and that I needed help. And so I started a Facebook support group, kind of just hoping to find other people like me. You know, there are some very specific peculiarities that only arise within the diabetes and eating disorder community, where it overlaps, where you have a low blood sugar and you have to eat, but you've already consumed as many calories as your dietitian has told you that day. What do you do? And other very, very specific problems that I wanted other people to talk to about it with. And within 3 months, we had 300 members, and I had done my research and found out this is clearly a very big problem in the diabetes world, and nobody's doing anything about it, which is how Diabulimia Helpline was formed 5 years ago now. And I've been on a rocky relapse recovery roller coaster, just like I think everyone who has an eating disorder does. You know, it was not perfect. I definitely, after the first year, I definitely relapsed. And I like to do everything, you know. I'm a perfectionist, so when I relapsed well and really hard, but I was good at relapse too. But thankfully, I was able to come back and kind of connected with an amazing therapist with the Emily program up here, and was able to kind of realign with recovery. And that's where I've been for about 5 years now, is working to help spread the awareness of diabetes with eating disorders. I think a lot like binge eating disorder. That's a really great comparison, because I've actually had a few conversations with the founder of Beta, and she's great, and we talked about what it's like trying to get recognition for a disorder that no one wants to acknowledge is out there. And the diabetes world has been kind of slow in acknowledging it, because if they acknowledge that there's a problem in the way they teach diabetes training, then they have to re-look at the way they do it. And of course, they don't want to do that. The eating disorder world has been a lot more welcoming and a lot more accepting, I think, because of organizations like Beta and things like orthorexia and other eating disorders that show that there's a whole host of ways to come about the same problem, and it's all symptoms treating the same disease.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. You have such an incredible story of recovery, and it's amazing to see what you've done as a result of your journey. And yeah, you started the Diabulimia Helpline, and that's a nonprofit organization. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about it, what's involved with your organization, how people can find out more about it?
Yeah. So the easiest way to find out about us is diabulimiahelpline.org, and that's DIBULIMIA helpline.org, until I've spelled that 100 times. Uh, and we run 3 online support groups. We run one just for diabulimia, one for diabetics with eating disorders. So a diabetic who has anorexia, a diabetic who has binge eating disorder. This is a place where they can go and talk about, some of the problems that arise with those particularities. And then we have a friends and family eating disorder support group, which, as anyone can talk about, I think it's hardest on the friends and family. And the last time, the time that finally got my recovery to stick, was because I ended up dying in the hospital during one of my relapses. I went in for surgery, and my body wasn't strong enough to handle it, and I ended up flatlining. And seeing my mom and my best friend in the corner of the room afterwards, when they had paddled me and done the CPR and brought me back, and the look on their faces, and just the tears streaming down my mother's face, and knowing that it had been so hard for her, and that whatever kind of a journey I was on, she was also on the same journey. And if I felt helpless and out of control in my eating disorders grips, how helpless must she feel, being one step even further removed from being able to do anything. And so she, who is also our family and friends liaison at Diabulimia Helpline, runs our family and friends support group, and I think it's one of the best things that we do. We have a 24-hour, 7 days a week actual hotline that you can call, and that number is 425-985-3635. And 24 hours means, Christmas morning, you're having trouble, someone's on that hotline to answer. And everyone who answers the phones, all of our volunteers, completely volunteer-based, have either had diabulimia or are a friend or family of someone who's had diabulimia, who's had training. Because as many diabulimics as call, just as many scared parents, scared husbands, scared sisters call, with a story of, my wife, daughter, whoever is suffering from this, they won't admit it. What do we do? Or what do I do? And we kind of can help walk them through that, and the steps of what something like an intervention might look like if it's that severe. Just some good ways to talk about it. We also have things that you can bring to your doctor if you're a diabetic who thinks this might be your problem, but you need a doctor you need to talk to your doctor about it. Doctors can sometimes be insensitive. I'm sure nobody has any experience with that. And so in that case, we've got some really great PDFs and handouts and tips and tricks on how to just talk to your doctor. Sometimes that can be the hardest part. And for a diabetic who an endocrinologist is supposed to, it's someone you meet with every 3 months, and for many diabetics can be the same doctor that diagnosed you, and there's a really close relationship there. Coming out to your doctor about this can oftentimes be just as hard as, coming out to a sibling or a parent. So we've got some tools for that. In addition, we do a lot of doctor training. We have what's called the Healthcare Education Series. We feel that, and in our experience, that doctors can be just as much part of the problem as the solution. a really great quote that one of our clients said is, "My doctor taught me how to hate my body and then gave me the tools to abuse it." And I think that's a great quote.
Mhm.
Right? That's how so many of us can feel. And so our healthcare education series, which we launched January in 2014, is one of absolutely my favorite things that we do. And we go all over the country. We just came back from Oklahoma, where we spoke at a facility there called Diabetes Solutions. And we basically talk to endocrinologists, diabetes educators, dietitians, nurses, anyone who will listen, really, on the right way to go about spotting or you dealing with more so diabulimia. You know, you think your client has it or your patient has it, and your patient comes to you and admits they have it. What's the next step? Because yelling at them, not the next step. And it seems so often what doctors seem to want to do. And so it's, let's not lecture, let's not scream at these people who need help. Let's just help. Um,
Right.
so that's one of the biggest things that we do. And we also do treatment referrals, which of course is such a big thing. And in trying to find it, I mean, so many diabulimics have stopped going to their doctor, you know, not wanting to acknowledge or deal with the complications of or ramifications of this. And so we do a lot of treatment referrals on, let's find you a doctor in your area that has some expertise in diabulimia. If you need a therapist, we'll find a therapist who has expertise in diabulimia. And if you live in bumfuck nowhere, Ohio, and there's no one within an hour, we'll find someone close to you, and then we can go about doing phone training with them so that they can have some experience or knowledge before you have to meet with them. And we also work very closely with treatment centers and kind of help them, those who don't have diabulimia programs, kind of start to uh, kind of put in place some protocols for treating diabulimia or diabulimics. And then there are treatment centers like Center for Hope or Eating Recovery Center that already have really great programs in place. And we kind of just go down there about once a year and look at their programs and see if anything needs to be changed or tweaked or suggestions. And I think that's it. You know, you can find from our website, you can get to us. You can also find any of our support groups. They're all done through Facebook. So if you just type in diabulimia in Facebook, diabulimia awareness is the one for, is the one to the thing to search. And we're the first thing.
Okay. That is phenomenal. It's amazing what you've created and all the fantastic resources that you offer. And I think that's one of the most impactful things of breaking stigma and shame and stereotypes is just creating awareness and bringing attention to something that a lot of people might misunderstand. So, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's just incredible what you've done in the eating disorder community. So, we really commend you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And just as a final thought, for any person out there who might be struggling with diabulimia, what encouragement or advice might you share with them?
Um, I think it's easy to start to feel hopeless in diabulimia, you know, because the eating disorder can be treated, but when it's over, you'll still have diabetes. And I think that's one of the main hindrances to diabulimia. But thankfully, you know, there is hope, and I think if you're going to pick a name for an organization, Ed Hope was such a great one to choose because it's such an important part of it, and knowing that there's hope on the other side. And you know, I'm in the middle of getting my master's degree, and I have an amazing boyfriend who I love, and the cutest dog in the whole wide world, and you know, life afterwards. And just think of all these things that I would have missed out on if I had given in or given up, or God forbid they hadn't been able to bring me back. It's such, it's almost unthinkable to me to try to fathom what I would have missed out on in my life if I had given up. And it's also so important to lean on the people around you, because like without my mom and without my boyfriend and without my best friend, there's no way I would have made it through, the really rocky part. And also there is a rocky part. I hate, almost as much as the stigma around eating disorders, is this idea that your recovery is going to be perfect and that recovery is supposed to look any sort of way. I mean, I did not do recovery the right way. I relapsed so many times and so hard, and just some really stupid decisions, I guess. But it all, as long as I kept trying and I kept remembering that there was a tomorrow, that's all that
Mm-hmm.
really mattered, for me, in getting to the next step. Because if I took any time to try to like focus on like, oh well, I'm not doing recovery right, it would just start a shame spiral. And I think ending up in that shame spiral is so easy to do in the recovery process, and we're so hard on ourselves, and we give ourselves no credit for how tough this process really is and how much we struggle on sometimes a daily basis, especially in the first parts of recovery, in invisibility, in a situation where I would go to work or I would go to school and no one had any idea that I would go home and just cry for an hour because it's so hard, and I never gave myself any credit for that. And I think that was the biggest thing that kept pulling me back into relapse, and the biggest thing that finally helped pull me into recovery was starting to give myself credit for what I had done and how hard recovery really, really is. And I think just making sure that you give yourself that credit and you give yourself that love, and remember that recovery's, your worst day in recovery is better than your best day in your eating disorder world. That's
Mm-hmm.
important an important thing to remember, and that like relapse can suck sometimes, or recovery can suck sometimes, and no one's going to say that it doesn't. But as long as you remember that, yeah, well, you're alive, and you're going to be alive tomorrow, and you're going to be alive a year from now. And especially in the diabulimic world, where the fatality rate or the mortality rate is so high in diabulimia, because you've got the complications of an eating disorder and the complications of diabetes. And so there's not that, oh well, I'll start tomorrow, I'll start recovery tomorrow, and that just doesn't apply as much to us because of the diabetes aspect of it. And so starting recovery right now, this minute, even if it just means taking, 2 units of insulin, or whatever recovery looks like for you, starting right this minute is going to be, because we can always come up with excuses. I'm the queen of excuses, and I had 1,000 of them, and I could have come up with 1,000 more. And so just remembering to like, recovery starts the minute you decide it does, and recovery looks like whatever you decide it does, and that your recovery isn't going to look like anyone else's. Remembering that as long as it's your recovery, as long as you are trying, and you are doing absolutely the best job you can do, and I commend you for that.
Thank you so much. That is such an incredible message of inspiration and hope. And I'm just so thankful that you could be with us
Yeah,
and
thank you
just
so much
share.
for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insight. Aw.
We're so very, very honored to get this invite, and you guys do some really incredible work.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's just such a pleasure to have you. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing in this community to raise awareness and provide resources for diabulimia. And again, for anyone who's interested in finding out more information about Erin and the Diabulimia Helpline, please be sure to visit diabulimiahelpline.org. Is that right, Erin?
Absolutely right.
Okay, wonderful. And also, if you're looking for any type of resources or need some help finding treatment, we also offer some amazing things on eatingdisorderhope.com, as well as information about our upcoming Google Hangouts and Twitter chats, which we hope you can be involved in as well. So thank you so much again, Erin. We appreciate you taking your time to be with us tonight, and just keep up the great work you're doing. You are moving mountains. Thank you.
Bye,
All right,
everyone.
everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for joining us. Bye bye.